yes, I had to come up with a title, and there is a story to the title. It ends up that this talk will get to the title by a bit of a circuitous route. So I'm going to start with just a little bit about myself, and then I'll start with explaining the discussion with James that got me into this. And then we'll carry on, and eventually we'll get to kindness before judgment. So first thing, so a little bit about me. I work part-time. I have my own business, EFT Devon. That stands, there's my little logo in the bottom there. And EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. And I train practitioners. Used to be in Devon, but now I train people from all over the world online. So that's one advantage we have from the current situation. And I'm also a parent carer, which is one of the reasons why I'm not working full time, but hopefully increasingly full time soon. So a little very, very brief history. I was teaching modern foreign languages at Park School until 2003. 2004, I retired due to ill health. As you can see, that was because nobody could get me better, because actually I had the wrong diagnosis. So it wasn't until 2008 that I actually got the correct diagnosis, still of a long-term condition, but I actually had surgery then, which made a big difference. So anyway, there I was, retired. EFT helped me a lot through that whole process, and so I started sharing EFT sort of fairly informally to start with, and it evolved into the business that I have currently. I have a daughter who is now 25. Just when I was starting to get somewhere near well, my daughter became ill when she was just starting secondary school. So she's now been not well for probably longer than she's been well in her whole life, which is a bit sad, really, and still working on her recovery with multiple conditions. So it's very complicated. So that meant, and at one point, I mean, things are better now, but at one point I really couldn't make commitments to work because of it was very unpredictable when she would need me. So I did something where it didn't matter that I couldn't make commitments because I was just volunteering. Nobody was paying me or anything, so I could just volunteer when I could. And that's how I became involved with what was then AMET International, which is the Association for the Advancement of Meridian Energy Techniques. And it's now EFT International. And in 2014, the chair resigned, and there was no one else silly enough to say yes, that they'd be chair. So I ended up as chair, but I do love it, actually. And we had the most amazing scientific symposium on Saturday on Zoom like this, with people from 20 countries around the world. There were even people in America who got up at 2 a.m. to attend our 9 o'clock start. So that was quite amazing. So I really love doing that. And that's another reason why my actual business is only part-time as well, because I'm now spinning 3 plates at least. Oh yes, and I'm South Molton Town Councillor, so that's the 4th plate that I spin, but I love it. So anyway, that's a bit about me. So this question, what does it mean to be fully human? Well, I suppose because of the work I do, the very first thought I had when James said we're doing talks on this topic, on this theme, and I said, well, it's about experiencing everything as being fully human. It's like experiencing all there is to experience. So the full range of human feelings and emotions, and allowing that as well. So, and then I thought, to be allowed to be, just to experience those emotions, to be with them, to be just as you are. So that was what I thought. And then I immediately got into a pet subject of mine, which is kindness and compassion and how important they are, and that they also help people dealing with this full range of emotions. So that's the sort of way I got into the kindness before judgment thing. But it's even more complicated because kindness before judgment is a hashtag that my daughter came up with when she was going through a particularly harsh time of discrimination, and she was really judged for her disability and then not allowed to be at university, basically. So that was important to her, and she was going to start a blog, but then she ran out of steam. But the beginnings of the blog, she wrote the first article, so it is there. We've left it up anyway, so you would find that at kindnessbeforejudgement.co.uk, but more about that later. So this morning, strangely enough, because of all the preparation for this symposium on Saturday, and then being involved in training most of yesterday, this talk got written today and these slides got made this afternoon. And I just almost gave poor James and Sammy a heart attack because I thought I've got until 7:30 and they were expecting me at 7:15, but that was largely because I was just finishing these slides, and then I thought, oh, I'd better get something to eat before I do this. So I do apologise. It's my fault for being in a rush today to do this and not reading the email properly that said 7:15. So my apologies. Anyway, so I was having this conversation with my daughter this morning and saying, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to talk about? And so she then said, so it was just amazing because she said exactly the same thing when I said, what does it mean to be fully human? And she said, yeah, it's about experiencing the full range of human emotions. So, and I hadn't prompted her or anything. And I'm just going to stop for a second because Penny's got a hand up, and I'm quite happy unless that's just an accident, that because sometimes people click the hand up thing and they don't mean to. But so was there a reason for that? No. Okay. Right, anyway, I'll carry on because it's such a small group of people here. I thought it doesn't matter if I just pause if there was something. Okay, so emotions. So emotions was clearly the thing that we both had in mind. So talking about emotions now. Well, the Latin root movere means to move. So I was interested this because people have talked about emotion and have talked of it as energy in motion. So we've got the Latin root move, and then ex movere or e movere means, and I've never studied Latin, so forgive me if I haven't pronounced that correctly. It means to move out or to excite. So we've got sort of excitement, emotion there. And then this was taken from Psychology Today, where they said, so it's taking action, stirs something up or moves something inside us. So we've got that sort of sense of a bit of motion, a bit of flow. Then looking at a very famous book by Candace Pert, who was a famous researcher who discovered the endorphins, the receptors for endorphins. And in her book, Molecules of Emotion, she describes the movement of biochemicals through the body, giving a sense of energy, because she's looking at the full spectrum of medicine, of Oriental and traditional Chinese medicine, as well as Western medicine. And she thinks that when in other forms of medicine they talk of like the sense of vital energy, like chi or prana in Ayurvedic medicine, that may well be explained by this movement of biochemicals through the body, which she was actually measuring the receptors for and the actions of. So I sort of put that in, just a few sort of bits and pieces about emotions. So also putting in there the natural state of energy, if this is a type of energy, is movement and flow. As long as energy is moving and flowing, not so much of a problem. The problem is if it gets blocked and dams up, or any sort of block. So there were some observations about emotions there and about movement. And I think the thing I'm coming to is that our emotions are very fluid. They're very, and they can be with us in an instant and go just as quickly. And there is a lot of movement there. Now this next bit was my daughter's, Amy's. As I'm probably going to keep mentioning her, I refer to her by name. Learning mechanisms, she said. They are learning mechanisms to be observed, noticed, experienced, and then allowed to flow. And I thought that's an interesting concept, that you learn from your emotions, and from noticing them and experiencing them. So put that in. And then she particularly mentioned there's all types of emotions, and people tend to judge them, and they tend to talk of a negative emotion or a positive emotion as if, and it's as if negative emotions were bad, or sometimes they're tabooed, or you're not allowed to have them. And she said that's wrong as well. It's like you're taking half of the human experience and judging it and saying it's wrong and it shouldn't be happening. So you have this darker side of emotion, as well as the wonderful emotions of joy and happiness and all those emotions that we love to have, excitement, everything. But for everything, there is that balance. There's the yin and the yang, the dark and the light. It goes through every philosophy that in order to see the light, we have to know darkness. Or we wouldn't recognize the light if we didn't know the dark as well. So a reason there for experiencing all of those emotions. So on to the next thing. So then it goes to negative emotions, because I don't think many people have a problem with positive emotions, but negative emotions are often made into some sort of taboo. And again, in our discussion this morning, she was quite feeling very strongly about that. So why should we allow these negative emotions? Because, you know, we've got, like, sadness is often not acceptable in society, and you have this saying of big boys don't cry, and you know, you're a big girl now, so you don't show your emotion, you can do this, okay, don't get worried about it, you know, all these. It's just so endemic in our upbringing, in the way in society, that there are emotions that we're not allowed to feel. Almost not, we might believe we're not allowed to feel. We're certainly not allowed to express them publicly. But of course, you're going to feel them anyway, and they're there to be learned from. And this is a really important point, I think. What you resist persists. It's a well-known saying. And so if you are trying to resist a negative emotion, it's just going to get stronger. So if you try to push them away or ignore them, they fight back. It can become an internal fight that drives a mental health issue. That was, and again, that is my wonderful daughter's words. And she has had her own fair amount of battles with mental health issues. So, and this is another thing she said: if you taboo it, you make it into a weapon against you. And I was just sitting there thinking, oh, this is a really good coffee. I'm getting all these gems of wisdom and these beautiful words. She's so good at coming up with better expressions than I possibly could. Because another thing she then said, she was really in the zone this morning, and she said, for people that want to ignore their negative emotions, you could look at a negative emotion, an emotional pain, like a wound on the brain. And she said, if you had a wound on your leg, would you just ignore it or pretend it wasn't there? Well, no. If it was a nasty wound and you didn't tend to it, you could end up with sepsis or gangrene or goodness knows what. So the only sensible thing would be to nurse it better, to heal it, to give it the attention it needs. And so she said, why not deal with the wounds on the brain in the same way? Why not, when an emotion is so bothersome, actually listen to it, actually tend to it, deal with it? And I thought, wow, that is an amazing comparison. I thought, yeah, that's really important. So I've put all this into, and I've made these slides just to remind me and prompt me of things. And then I can't do a talk, of course, without mentioning emotional freedom techniques. And the wonderful thing that EFT, the gift that EFT provides us with, is that we can always reduce the intensity of a negative emotion with this technique. So there's no need to fear powerful emotions. And I think sometimes that's why negative emotions are just repressed. They're not allowed. People try and deny them or hide them, sweep them under the carpet, whatever. And I think there is a degree of fear that if you let an emotion become too big, you won't be able to deal with it. It'll take over, and you won't get back from it. So you've got to try and be positive all the time. And I've just realised that I can't time my talking here because my screen isn't showing the clock on the screen. So if you excuse me for a second while I reach for a clock, just so I can make sure I'm on time. Because was it 8:15 will it be, James, for me to stop? Yeah, okay. So there we are. So that gives me about 20 minutes more. So what can help with these negative emotions, if we're going to have this full range of human experience of emotion, how do we cope with that? Some people will always cope better than others, but what ways are there that will help us? So emotions are always going to be there. It's like these annoying negative thoughts. We don't get a choice about them. They just appear half the time, and we can't do anything with them until they're there. So they're going to appear, but once they are there, then we can choose our reaction to them. And what Amy suggested to me was observing them, noticing them, acknowledging them, and accepting them. So it's just accepting that emotion is there, that it's appeared, and maybe there's a reason for it. Maybe it has something useful. Maybe it has a message for you. Maybe it doesn't. But let's just be neutral about it. Let's say, okay, I'm feeling like this. If I don't experience this uncomfortable feeling, how will I know what feelings I really want? So acknowledging them, accepting them. As I said, if they become overwhelming, we have EFT tapping. And I think that is so empowering because it means that we can actually interact with these emotions. We can allow them. We can feel like it's possible for us to take control over them, because I know that sometimes they can feel completely overwhelming and that there's never any way out of them, or there's never control. And then that can lead to a form of despair or hopelessness or far worse feelings. So wonderful that we can use this tool to help if they're overwhelming. And one of the things, I'll just tell you a little bit about EFT tapping. Actually, to demonstrate it is a whole other talk, but just a little bit about it, because I love the words part of it. It's called tapping. So you tap acupressure points. They're all the end points of acupressure meridians. And when you tap those points, research has shown that signals are sent to the brain, particularly to the limbic brain, to the amygdala, which is the seat of emotions and anxiety and the fight-flight response. And these signals are calming. So I don't think you ever find someone who taps and doesn't at the very least say, oh yeah, I feel quite relaxed now. So that's the tapping part of it. But the words, and I love the way we use words in tapping. because we'll say, okay, we've got a tapping target, maybe some negative emotion, maybe a feeling of sadness, a loss, grief, anger, feeling fear, whatever it is. And we always say at the beginning of the round of tapping these words, even though I feel this fear, even though I feel this sadness, even though I feel this anger, whatever emotion can be applied to anything. And then we say a positive statement, which the default one is often, I deeply and completely accept myself, or I love and accept myself, or even as simple as I'm okay, or I'm dealing with it. But it's basically, yes, I'm acknowledging this emotion. It's okay. It's like, but even though I'm experiencing this emotion, which I can't get out of, I accept myself with this emotion. Even though it's there, I'm dealing with it. I've got these tools. I can deal with it, and I'm going to be okay. So that's what I love about the words, and a little bit more, actually more about that a bit later. But while we're just working through these possible ways of dealing with negative emotions, acknowledging and accepting them with kindness and compassion and freedom from judgment. And that, I think, is super important, particularly towards yourself, because when you think about it, if you feel really sad and you think, oh, everybody's happy all the time, why do I have to be sad? And it's not fair, and why me? Why do I have to be sad? Why am I getting sad? And you start to, I should be happy, I should be able to get over this like everybody else does, or whatever self-talk you give to yourself. If it is some way of beating yourself up or comparing yourself with others, or saying you're not good enough just because you're feeling like this, then you're just making it 10 times worse. So you're feeling even more negative emotion just because you feel a negative emotion. And that is a downward spiral. So this is where it's so important to be compassionate and understanding and kind to yourself. And it's like, well, even if I do feel this, I've got into this situation, maybe I'm justified, maybe it's okay. And it's like that total acceptance and acknowledgement of it breaks down the persistence of it. So if you remember, we said earlier on, what you resist persists. So as long as you're being cross about having the emotion, you're trying to fight it off, anything like that, you're resisting it, it's going to stay there, it's going to get stronger. It's like a battle, and it's going to be even more difficult to deal with it. But the minute you actually acknowledge it and accept it, it's like giving in, saying, okay, I'm here to experience every part of life. This is part of the experience, and I'm okay with this. And this will pass. Life is never the same. Life moves up and down all the time. And I can sit with this. And the nature of energy is that it will flow. This is going to flow. This is going to change, just the same as this emotion was suddenly with me. It's going to move on again as well. And of course, you can give it a nudge to do that with EFT, if you know EFT. But just the acceptance is going to reduce the power of any negative. So, and the importance also of, so I'm just checking my notes as well, because I've got an example here, a graphical example. Yeah, no, it's from the next slide. So, so towards self, most important, but also from kindness and compassion from others that you experience is going to be so healing and so helpful, and hopefully will encourage you to give that kindness and compassion towards others. And of course, the more you are being kind and compassionate towards yourself and understanding, the more able you will be to be understanding towards others. So kindness towards self, it needs a sort of unconditional love. Now, I work with a lot of people who might be suffering chronic pain or chronic conditions, And where you have had a condition that's been going on a long time, there's always emotion attached to, for example, that pain, the part of your body that isn't behaving as you want it to behave. And you can get very frustrated with it and very angry with it. And one of the things we do with EFT is to use it to reduce those negative emotions and then to look in a different way at the problem. And if you can think of, supposing it's a body part that's not working in the way you would want it to, something that is always giving you pain. Supposing every time you walk, you get a pain in your ankle or something. You're going to get so fed up. You're always going to be talking to people about, oh, my ankle, and it's just, but how can your ankle heal when it's living in that space, in that energy? If you have a child and you want to help it grow and flourish, you will give it unconditional love. You know, that's the sort of love that a mother gives to a child, where it doesn't matter whatever they do. Okay, they might get told off, but basically their mother never stops loving them. That unconditional love, when we, if you're religious and you speak of the word God is love, it's that love that transcends everything, that is always there, that we can rely on. And we can choose to give that to ourselves. And when we do that, we create a healing space. We can clear blocks to healing. And you can help this by working on the emotions that get in the way of that. Because whenever you're hating and reproaching yourself, you're keeping yourself in that space, and it's going to do damage. So, and I have a wonderful graphic, Masaru Emoto. He had something, I'm not sure if it was an actual Nobel Prize for his work. If not, it was something very close, Japanese equivalent. He's very well known for a book called, sorry, I actually have it here. The hidden messages of water. And he, as a scientist, was fascinated with water and developed the ability to photograph the molecules of water at the very point of crystallization. And he was interested to see if emotions and words could affect water. So he would keep water in jars with labels on them, like I love you or I hate you, you disgust me, thank you, gratitude. And then he did this procedure. I don't know, I mean, obviously it's a scientific procedure. I'm not an expert on physics or anything like that, but he was able to create these amazing photos. So this is a video, it's a little bit about him, and then shows you some of those photos. So they're all here. Is that okay? Okay, so back to where we were. So the graphic example. So if that's what thought is doing to water, and you saw how those sort of almost snowflake shaped crystals from the beautiful thoughts and the beautiful words, and also with music, whether it was a symphony that was played to it or heavy metal music, how chaotic that would be. And you saw which pictures were these beautiful crystals and which ones were absolutely chaotic. And now thinking, because on this topic still, kindness towards self, we are made up of something like 70–80% water in our body. So if we are constantly thinking those thoughts, and it can do that to the water, I'm just wondering what it does to us. And here's an example with an apple. So this isn't an experiment that anyone can do, because one of my clients actually didn't believe me and went off and did it, and got exactly the same results. So you take an ordinary apple, perfect apple, and you cut it in half. Then you put one half in a jar which says love. You put one half in a jar that says hate, and put them in sort of close enough to be in the same environment, the same temperature, but far enough apart so that you can go and talk to it every day. And to the one in the jar that says love, you say, I love you every day. And the one in the jar that says hate, you say, I hate you every day. These photos, and of course the jar's sealed, so it's keeps to some extent. Anyway, these are the same apple, each half, after 7 days of one being experiencing love and the other experiencing hate. And again, apples were used for this because their water content is something similar to us, to the sort of 70%-ish. I think the brain is 80% water. So just a little experiment there, and I'm running out of time, so I will probably drastically shorten the next bit, because this was the example about kindness from others, and this is just our personal story and what I've observed. As I said, I had my daughter was fine until she got to secondary school, and then she had glandular fever, which was believed to have developed into chronic fatigue, and she was off school for a long while, and then it was increasingly difficult for her to fit back into school. And then it was realized actually she had been masking an autistic spectrum condition all the time, because girls are very good at that. And autism is, the ratio from boys to girls is that there is one girl diagnosed with autism for every 4 boys. But the actual incidence of autism is probably much more equal. It's just girls are very, very good at disguising it and masking. And when they usually do get diagnosed, whereas the boys will get diagnosed much younger, with girls it will be in their teens, when everything becomes too much of a pressure to just keep up that act that they've managed to get going. And there's far too many social demands and demands of change that happen in secondary school. So she has experienced a lot of bullying from school when she tried to get back there, a lot of being ostracized, feeling alone, it being very different. So for those with neurodiversity, and actually we're not even sure which part of the autistic spectrum she would belong in, whether it's Asperger's, PDA, ADD, but she's very, very bright and amazing to talk to, as from my discussion this morning. And when people are kind to her, she does amazing things. When they are unkind, she just ends up with secondary mental health conditions, and it's basically one extreme or the other with nothing in between. So one of the colleges she went to, she had fabulous tutor, and she was able to make friends, and she got a treble distinction in her extended diploma, which allowed her to go to university with way more UCAS points than she needed for the course she wanted to do. But with the stress that most students experience at the beginning of university, unfortunately, as well as her autistic spectrum condition, she has Crohn's disease, and it's so common for students to get a flare if they have IBD at the beginning of university. So that happened to her. But then she needed to get other people to communicate for her, like me, communicate for her, because she wasn't well enough. She didn't have the energy from having the physical illness, the Crohn's, to deal with the mental health challenges, and asked for me to take over. Now, the university didn't take kindly to that. They don't like parents being involved at all, even when they're carers and even when they're enablers. And the whole thing resulted in the university being more and more difficult, and eventually insisting that she attend meetings, which they really weren't making reasonable adjustments for, because it's hard enough. They just go stepping back a bit. They have a student support mechanism which requires the student to attend a multidisciplinary meeting. So that is student plus a representative if they want, and probably 4 or 5 members of staff, some of whom they don't know. Now, and they usually use one of the university boardrooms or something like that. So a formal meeting that comes across like an interview, which would be a challenge probably for the neurotypicals. But for neurodiverse, who can usually only manage to focus on one person at a time, nightmare. It's almost impossible. And that's supposed to be how you access student support. So student support wasn't accessible. This point was made to the university, and they were asked for the reasonable adjustment of allowing her to meet with one person at a time. They refused that. And then they called, this went backwards and forwards, and eventually they called a level 3 case conference, which they only call in the worst cases, because they have to be able to be able to exclude someone. It has to be a level 3 case conference. And they decided that because she couldn't attend these meetings, she wasn't fit to attend university either, because it would, rather than make the adjustments that were needed to enable someone to do university, they would rather chuck them out and exclude them. So, and we had a 3-year battle, and we still were never able to prove, well, not prove, we weren't able to have anything really happen to the university because of that discrimination. It was blatantly against the Equality Act. But there was no way of holding them to account. They're such a big, powerful organisation that if they decided to do it, they were going to do it. And you couldn't even take them to court, because if you want to bring a case of discrimination, it has to be brought within 6 months of the act of discrimination occurring. And it took that long just to get through the university's complaints procedures, and it's probably quite deliberate. So, but the effect on her was massive, and so she still hasn't. So that has taken up the last 4 years of her life, and she's still recovering from it. So, so this is why she started this blog. Well, she was going to start this blog, Kindness Before Judgement, because she said that university judged her by the labels that she had, the illness labels. And if they'd just been kind and just allowed her to talk to them in the way that was appropriate for her, she would have been fine, and she could have done everything. She could have achieved probably a first-class degree in the same way that she got a triple distinction at her college. So, so that is really important thing to me. And if we've got time, I'd like to finish with playing you a piece of music from that time, and just to illustrate how important it is to be kind to each other.